Hello, and welcome to Profiles in Courage, the show that focuses on ordinary Nigerians doing extraordinary things to move our country forward. My name is Stanley Bentu, and today we focus on Dike Chukwumerije, who's a poet, and he talks about national integration through art.
He once dreamed of becoming a medical doctor, but was swept off his feet by a love for literature. Dike Chukwumerije is a Nigerian spoken word and performance poetry artist. He is also an award-winning author who has creatively fused entertainment with a call for reawakening of national consciousness. Dike was born in Lagos before moving north to Abuja, where he studied law at the university there. Heavily influenced by his father, Uche Chukwumerije, who published a Pan-Africanist magazine, Afriscope, in the 1970s, he became a gifted storyteller, interpreting national events and making social commentary through poetry. Since 2013, Dike has hosted and directed the annual Night of Spoken Word, a performance poetry event. He is part of a movement that has inserted performance poetry into Nigeria's mainstream pop culture. At TEDx Maitama in September 2017, Dike's rendition of his poem, The Wall and the Bridge, attracted widespread public attention to his message of the need for a national rebirth. This afternoon, Dike Chukwumerije opens up about his theatre production made in Nigeria, currently touring the country.
Why you put that on stage, and I hear this gasp from the audience when these innocent people are struck down, I feel a sense of gratification because that gasp means empathy.
He also speaks about why his interest in writing and poetry began.
And my first memories of poetry were copying his poems into an exercise book. That was the first time I ever read poetry. My elder ones were much older than me. So when they're talking and I want to contribute, they're like, "Shut up, small boy, what do you know?"
So poetry was your voice?
Poetry was my voice.
He gives an insight to riveting speech at the 23rd Nigeria Economic Summit that held the audience spellbound and went viral on social media.
What happened at the NESG was the fruit of 10 years of research and thinking about the issue of identity. And it's not just about one Nigeria for me, it's really about the theme of our common humanity.
Welcome back. My name is Stanley Bentu, and I've just been joined by poet and nationalist Dike Chukwumerije. Hi, Dike.
Hello, Stanley. Thank you for having me.
Great to see you again. It's been quite a while.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure, and I find your work very inspirational. I must say that, not just because it's art and it's poetry, but because it has a purpose to it.
Yeah.
You talk about keeping Nigeria one, and I want to start there because recently there's been so much agitation coming from the southeastern part of the country. You are from the southeastern part of the country, incidentally, but I've never heard anyone speak so passionately about one Nigeria, at least in recent times, like you did, especially during the Nigerian Economic Summit that came up. So tell me about that. How did that come about? How did you get involved in that?
That was just a straightforward invitation to come and do a presentation. But it was coming off the back of a TEDx talk I had done 2 months earlier at TEDx Maitama in July, and then they heard the talk, and the NESG people thought that we'd really love you to come and duplicate this at the NESG forum. And the talk I gave at the TEDx was coming off the back of a poem I had written 5 years earlier, titled The Wall and the Bridge, that talked about really nationalism and unity and oneness. And that in turn was coming off the back of a book I had written 5 years earlier, titled One Nigeria, The Birth and Evolution of an Idea. So really what happened at the NESG was the fruit of 10 years of research and thinking about the issue of identity. And it really doesn't, it's not just about one Nigeria for me. It's really about the theme of our common humanity. You know, these issues of sectarianism and hatred over identity is not unique to Nigeria. It's all over the world. You know, but the key line in the poem is that there is no culture on earth that is older than being a human being. Mm-hmm. You know, so this was my own recognition, and I was just sharing it with the world that in the end, if you want to fight, but don't say it's because we're different. You know, and I think that's the key idea.
Mm. So do you think that people use ethnicity or religion as an excuse to express anger and hatred? But where do you think that anger and hatred comes from?
Particularly, let me come back home to Nigeria. There are many concrete socioeconomic and sociopolitical reasons for people to be angry. Yeah. You know, there is poverty, there is corruption, there is no power, there is no education is poor, health facilities are poor. So people have many objective reasons to be angry. But the problem with tribalism is that it stops the common sufferers of these ailments, these socio-political ailments, from coming together. So a northerner who is suffering from the effects of bad governance and a southerner who is suffering from the effects of bad governance are unable to come together to tackle bad governance because they are fighting each other over issues of tribe, religion, and identity. And that's why I see tribalism as being one of the things that are the root cause of Nigeria's inability to move forward, because we are unable to tackle our real problems frontally because we are fighting these shadow battles over identity. You know, so it's very hard to form, you know, coalitions that transcend tribe and ethnicity to tackle socioeconomic issues, because invariably people will start saying, why is the president from Abia? If the president is from Abia, the vice president must be from somewhere in the north, or if he's a Christian. So you begin to fight over these geopolitical balancing of positions in organizations and groups to the detriment of what you're supposed to be focusing on.
Yeah. But I suppose in an ideal world, it's easy to write off the need for some kind of ethnic balance. Yeah. But when you look at why that came about in the first place, because it wasn't ill-intentioned. Yeah. There was a lot of nepotism going on, or a lot of people coming from different parts of the country and getting the jobs that they were getting simply because the head of that organization came from their part of the country. Yeah. And it was in an attempt to check this that the concept of federal character came about. Now, it's come with its own fair share of problems. Yeah. But how do you eliminate it without falling back to the problem that necessitated it in the first place?
Yeah, you honestly have to strike a balance between federal character and meritocracy. And I think one way of striking that balance is by having an objective standard appraisal system. So yes, even though I am a very radical meritocrat, I would rather just have a system that is meritocratic and ignores where people come from. But I accept that that's a bit too extreme. So to me, how you can find a balance in the middle is have a uniform standard. It's like a cutoff mark, right? Don't have different cutoff marks for different states. Have a uniform cutoff mark. A good grade is a good grade. It doesn't change whether the person is from Katsina or from Bayelsa. You know, an A is an A B is a B. Now, if you do that, and then distribute the positions, or make sure that whatever state you're coming from, you meet that minimum standard. If there's any state in this country that is unable to meet that minimum standard, then you can have a targeted program, capacity building program for that state to build up people to meet that standard. But you do not lower the standard just to accommodate people, because in the end, you are shooting all of us in the foot. When you give a position to somebody who is not qualified for that position, and that person is supposed to produce public good, then you're putting the entire society at risk just to accommodate the feelings of a tiny little group. So what I feel is that have a basic uniform standard, do not lower it, and then use that to judge what areas of this country don't have the capacity to meet that standard, and have targeted programs to selectively build capacity in that area so that they can eventually meet those standards. Yeah. But do not lower standards just to accommodate representation in critical areas. there are other places you can play politics with, and we all know there are things that are not too sensitive. But when it comes to security, when it comes to health, when it comes to education, some of these frontline or priority areas, I think you should always put your best foot forward.
Now, you chose a very interesting tool to advance your message. And I say it's interesting because you've decided to engage Nigerians emotionally.
Yeah.
I'm referring to poetry.
Yeah.
And the government has often missed this. So whenever the government wants to go on some sort of mobilization drive, the first tool of choice is the jingle, the radio, television ad.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, what happens with these jingles is people tune off.
Yeah.
That's the time when they go to the bathroom. That's the time when they make phone calls.
Yeah.
So these messages are lost.
Yeah.
And because there's a sameness in the repetition, people don't really connect. And we all know that people actually change as a result of how they've been affected emotionally.
Yeah.
And so poetry is one of those ways. I think music is one of those ways, movies. Do you feel that the government has exploited the arts as a way of shaping people's minds?
I feel the government hasn't. I also feel the government probably cannot. Because the power of art is its honesty and its sincerity. And where a government has a credibility problem, then anything it touches has a credibility problem. So a lot of times people tune off, not really because of the message, but because of the messenger. You don't trust the messenger, and therefore you don't trust the message. And it's a massive credibility problem for the government that people do not believe their leaders anymore. So whenever, if I were to become a politician today, my credibility level will probably drop by like 50%. Just the fact that I have become a politician, people will just immediately begin to question my motives. So some of the things that allows one to speak powerfully is because you're not a politician. You don't nobody's paying you to do this. Nobody is pulling your strings. And therefore people think that this is actually coming from this person's heart. They actually believe what they're saying. Because you need to trust the messenger before you really begin to get into the message. And that's the power that an artist has, because it's assumed that you're doing this out of passion. And it's your passion that carries across to your audience. It's not really the sophistication of your thinking or the beauty of your language, but there's an honesty, a sincerity that comes across, that builds a bridge to the human heart. So I believe that art is a very strong channel for communicating messages, because art speaks to the heart. And there is a popular saying, or not so popular, but there's a saying by Maya Angelou, a very popular African-American poet that I hold close to my heart. She says that people may forget what you say, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And that's the power of art. So when you inspire people, or you motivate them, or you just make them feel better about life, give them hope, it's a very powerful thing. There's something almost metaphysical about it, or spiritual about it, So it's something that the government doesn't really utilize. I don't know if they can utilize it, because, like I said, the moment you lack credibility as the messenger, you can't use art. People will see through
art.
it.
Art forces you to look in the mirror.
Yeah.
Which
to deliver,
not like doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Very often.
To deliver art that is powerful, you have to be honest with yourself as an artist. So it can't be a jingle. It can't be some kind of psychological thing you're trying to play on people. There has to be a level of honesty about it.
Now, unlike you, your father's tool of choice was politics, and he was very much involved in politics. How much would you say you learned from him, and how much did he influence you?
My father, I learned a lot from him,
What was he like?
In person.
As a person.
As a person. He was like a typical African father. Read your book, pass your exams, become a lawyer, don't chase women. And then that was I was asking you, after you graduate, when are you bringing a wife home? Meanwhile, they told you all your life not to chase. Well, how do you find the wife? So he was like that, but he was also a very disciplined and focused person, and some of the greatest things he gave me was, even though he was famous in Nigeria, I was raised very ordinarily. I wasn't raised with the sense that I was the son of a big man. He always made it very clear that you have to make your way in life. You have to find your path in life. You have to find what makes you tick, what makes you want to get up in the morning, and that's what life is about.
Was there a lot of poetry in the house?
There was
How
not
did
a
you
lot of
discover
poetry, but there was a lot of literature. Because my dad was a journalist, so the house was full of books. It was full of paintings. It was full of art. He collected sculptures, he collected paintings, and he collected books. One of our favorite things we did together was he would give me money and send me off to go buy books for him. And he wouldn't give me a list. He would say, what my general interests are, so just buy, And I loved it because I love bookshops, And then I remember when we're very young, he'll make you listen to the news at 7 and summarize it. And then he'll mark your composition, whatever they call this, composition. He'll mark it and correct.
Did you hate doing that?
Oh, that is red pen.
I can imagine for a young child. The time for the news was the time where you didn't get to watch video. So.
And he'll make you watch it and summarize the news. And he would always encourage you to read. He always said, read biographies, read autobiographies of great people. Learn about your society, be involved in your community. Don't isolate yourself.
So at what point did you think of poetry as a
poetry came early to me because my elder brother Che is a poet, and he used to write poetry when we're young and compose music.
But this is in Nigeria where things like poetry, even mainstream artistic endeavors like music and movies were not doing very well at that time.
Yeah, but like I said, I was raised to look inward. That was the message I grew up with from my mother and my father. Look inside you. What is your gift? Develop it. So we weren't raised to look into the society or into the economy and say, where is the money? We're raised to look at our natural abilities and develop that. That was always the consistent messaging from my mother and my father. Always be true to yourself. So that is their greatest legacy to me and to all my siblings. So, my elder brother, he wrote poetry, he wrote music. I remember when we were really small, sometimes he would give us little time. He'll say, okay, write a song today, and then we'll come and perform it for him. And then he would, this is, our firstborn. And my first memories of poetry were copying his poems into an exercise book. That was the first time I ever wrote poetry. I'll look at his poems and I'll copy it into my own exercise book. And then from there I began to write, and I just kept on writing because I was an introvert as a child. And my elder ones were much older than me. So when they're talking and I want to contribute, they're like, shut up, small boy, what do you know?
So poetry was your voice.
Poetry was my voice. That's how I dealt with growing up. That's how I dealt with, domestic issues, heartbreak in school, bullies.
In your country. Which brings me to Made in Nigeria.
Yeah.
A play, I think, or in fact, it's more than a play. I saw it recently during the Satire Week, and it was a concert. It was an entire show, and you were the headliner, and you were talking about the story of Nigeria. And one of the most interesting things I picked up on was the story of the Civil War. And now you find that a lot of these arguments that took place in 1966 are being repeated and have been repeated, have crossed generations of Nigerians. And it's almost as if we haven't moved on. And you told a love story in the middle of the Made in Nigeria play. Can you tell me more about that story and why you wrote it? What was the inspiration?
I was Made in Nigeria obviously tries to tell the history of Nigeria. We try and do it very quickly in 2 hours, and we go from 1914 till current times, and it's divided into sort of scenes. So you have the sort of pre-independence, and then you have the 60s and the 70s. So and in each decade we take some of the key themes of that decade and we try and express it on stage. And some of the key issues of the 60s, obviously the coup, the Civil War. However, in Made in Nigeria, I wanted to focus on an aspect of our history that is not, sometimes we don't focus on it a lot. And it's called the pogrom in the history books. And this is in the aftermath of the first coup, the 15th of January coup, where there was a counter coup in July, and then all of a sudden there was this sort of uncontrolled and widespread killing of everybody who was considered to be from the southeast or Igbo. So people just went out on the streets and began to kill, Igbos. And really, that was really one of the first instances of what you term ethnic cleansing in this country. It was a very ugly episode where lots of innocent people lost their lives just because of their ethnicity. Now, this is a recurring theme in our history. You know, it's happening all the time. It's still happening today, where people are being sort of put in a box because of, you don't know the person, just because of their ethnic group. You put them in a box and you subject them to a treatment that you think they merit simply because they are in that box. You know, I wanted to humanize that aspect, because I found that prior to the show, when I'm talking about the pogrom with my friends, you know, who are from other ethnic groups, they found it very hard to sympathize or empathize with that aspect of our history. Mm-hmm. You know, they would always say, it's Igbo people that did the first coup, so why should you be upset if there's a retaliation? And like, what do you mean by it's Igbo people that did the first coup? Did the entire ethnic group gather somewhere and plan a coup? You know, so you find this generalization. You take the actions of a few people and you attribute it to an entire group, you know, and it's just wrong. And so the objective of that part of the show was to humanize this thing and get people to see that it was human beings like me and you. It's just like today that we're having problems with the Fulani herdsmen in the Middle Belt. It's just like if everybody just goes out on the road and any Fulani person you see, you just begin to kill them. Just because there are some Fulani people, or so-called Fulani, we don't even know if they're really Fulani people, in the Middle Belt that are killing people. Does that then justify going out on the road and any Fulani person you see, you begin to kill them? You know, so I try to humanize that story. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the most gratifying aspects of that production for me.
Yeah, so it's a love story between two people.
Yes.
And they fall in love.
And they fall in love, and then they are caught up in the crisis.
And they're caught up in the crisis.
And then they lose their lives. So whenever you put that on stage, I don't want to give too much away, so people can come and watch the show. Whenever you put that on stage, and I hear this gasp from the audience when these innocent people are struck down, I feel a sense of gratification, because that gasp means empathy. It means you understand what it feels like to be an innocent person going to market or going to school. Then Christians and Muslims are fighting around you, and somebody just grabs you and kills you because you are a Christian, or he thinks you're a Christian, or he thinks you're a Muslim.
And the beautiful thing about the way you tell that story is you tell it through the eyes of the victim.
Yeah.
And I don't think we do that enough. We take it too much from the angle of the angry person.
Yeah.
But you tell the story of everybody being hurt.
Yeah.
And therefore there is a need to forgive.
Yeah.
There's a need for you to break that circle of violence.
Just to step back and see me. You know, see me, that I can be your brother, I can be your friend, I'm not different. I may be Igbo and you may be Hausa, but my blood is red. I have children at home. I'm trying to get food to them. I want to pay their school, just like you. Just see me. Because I believe that if you understand someone, it's impossible to hate them. You may not agree with them, but it's impossible to hate them because you understand them. So what the essence of art is to always try and put you in the shoes of the other person. See the world through the other person's eyes. Just so at least you understand where they're coming from.
I've experienced something on radio. People call in, particularly when there's a religious crisis or an ethnic crisis. Yeah. And when the big story is that a bomb has gone off in a mosque, I hardly hear a lot of Christians calling in to show outrage.
Yeah.
There's almost a conspiracy of silence.
Yeah.
When you hear a bomb goes off in a church, then you hear a lot of people call in and say, oh, well, the Muslims have been doing this since time immemorial. They're always attacking church. But mosques are getting bombed too. So when you look at it, people on all sides are getting hurt. So how do we heal from that?
Well, that's why I said that the essence of art is to try and connect those dots. There are many unconnected dots. An example I like to give is the Chibok girls, for instance. So you may have a farmer in Enugu State who's unfortunately, maybe in one of these herdsmen rampages, has lost a daughter to herdsmen. Then you have a father in Borno State whose daughter has been kidnapped again by some kind of extremists. But the man in Enugu who has lost his daughter to the same phenomenon is unable to empathize with a man in Borno who has also lost his daughter to the same phenomenon simply because of differences of religion or ethnicity. But it's the job of the artist to show that it's the same thing. You are both in the same boiling hot water. You're both in the same situation. Again, I tell people sometimes it's like somebody who lives in Maraba, an Igbo person that lives in Maraba, his neighbor is from Nasarawa State. They live next door to each other. They come out in the same morning, jump over the same overflowing gutter, struggle to get in the same bus to come to work in town, go back. But that Igbo guy in Maraba feels that he has more in common with some other Igbo guy that lives in Mitama in a 6-bed mansion, who sends his children to school in Harvard and Oxford, travels abroad every weekend. He feels that he has more in common with that man, just because that man is Igbo, and with his own neighbor, that he suffers, lives through the same conditions every day. There is a certain irrationality to it, to this tribalism thing. It's not that I don't have cultural pride. I'm an Igbo man. I love my culture. But also now there's a certain irrationality to it when you actually think about it, that there are so many things that connect us that we just ignore. We're just blind to it. And we just focus on this one thing. And it's the object of the artist to make the things that have become invisible to you out of habit, to make them visible again. So the artist makes you see the sun, makes you see the flowers, makes you see the grass again. You see these things every day, but you just walk past. It's the job of the artist to make you see it, that the grass is green, and the sun is beautiful, that the wind is soft on your face. It's the job of the artist to make you see that this guy is just like you. So that's what art tries to do, and if it's not able to do that, then it's not.
And you do that so well. And we're pretty much out of time, but DK, you know what I always do? I never let you go unless you give me a few lines of your poetry. Okay. So I want to hear something about Nigeria, something beautiful.
So I'll do The Revolution Has No Tribe because it's short and sweet. Do you not know that poverty is not an Ijo man? He will not spare the rest of us and afflict only the Ishan. He will step across the river and come across the border. So when the drums sound, let everybody answer. Do you not know that corruption is not from Nekede? He will not hear that Ife has no dealings with Mother Keke. He will wake up all of our children at night with hunger. So when the drums sound, let everybody answer. Do you not know that HIV/AIDS is not Kanuri? He will not spare the rest of us and kill only the Fulani. He will set the land ablaze from the delta to the Sahara. So when the drums sound, let everybody answer. Do you not know that our enemies have no face? They are indigents of no state. They come from no place. And if this boat capsizes, every one of us will go under. So when the drums sound, let everybody answer. Do not say, I am the Iroko, when the forest is burning. Do not say, I am the Obeche, when the forest is burning. Our differences will not stop us from perishing together. So when the drums sound, let everybody answer.
Wow. I think you deserve a standing ovation for that. Thank you
very much,
so
Stanley.
much.
I appreciate it.
Okay. And that's it for Profiles in Courage for this edition. See you next time. My name is Stanley Bentu. Bye-bye.